Hey, everybody, welcome back to Her Rules Radio. This is Alex, your hostess, your coach, your guide through crazy times. And I decided to do this bonus podcast this week with an incredible mentor and resource and guide in her own work, Cristie Ritz-King. Cristie is a licensed professional counselor and parenting coach, and she has an incredible background in trauma work and has led retreats for women. She has 3 of her own kids. Cristie, I'm so glad to have you here on Her Rules Radio right now. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's so important to be talking about this right now.
It really is. So we're going to be talking about parenting in tough times, parenting during crisis. And you are an expert parenting coach and a professional counselor helping parents and moms especially. So tell us about why you were drawn to, why do you do this work in the first place?
It's interesting. I've had, a varied and windy journey to get here, but it always, no matter what I did, I started as a teacher. I was then an online content creator. I have had a variety of sales jobs to just try to make money while I was in graduate school. I was a health coach for a while, but I was a doula. It always comes back to moms, no matter what I do. And I think even in my work with trauma survivors, I've worked with domestic and sexual violence victims. I've worked with just, your standard everyday folks who've lived a life with, adverse childhood experiences. There is something that happens when you're a mother specifically, where a lot of that opens up and you have to try to find out who you are in this new context of parenting. And I think, so my base is in that. I'm rooted in this kind of find out, go inside and find out who you are so that you can be a better mom. And it's really coming to, ahead, I guess you would say, in this environment, because we're all pushed to our limits personally right now. And we're trying really hard to also do best by our kids. So now more than ever, it's really important to know who you are, to take care of yourself, which seems counterintuitive, but really is the only way you can do what you need to do for your kids, is by taking care of yourself first.
Yeah.
So I'm just really passionate about helping moms understand that A, they're not alone, that B, a lot of what they're feeling is normal, and see that there is a way out of it, that they can really thrive in a life as, an ambitious woman and as a mom.
Okay. So, we're going to be talking about trauma, your work with it, your training, and what it is and its impact on our emotional health, and also how to help ourselves through it. So can you define trauma for us first?
Yes, although I'll admit that mine is a more loose definition, I think, than what is sort of accepted in the world. To me, trauma is any event that is threatening or life-changing. So I'll give you an example. I view childbirth as traumatic because whether everything went according to plan or not, you are figuratively and literally, I guess, kind of broken open. And so you're left to figure out your life anew after this event happens. So for kids, when we think of trauma, we think of the kind of the obvious stuff, abuse, neglect, sexual violence, things like that, which obviously those are traumatic experiences. But there can also be attachment trauma when you're younger, where you have, you weren't neglected per se, but it was an inconsistent parenting, or there were lessons that you learned about how to live from your parents that didn't serve you. And so I include that in my definition of trauma. I include attachment trauma. I include, childhood lessons that become patterns in communication in your life later as trauma. So when I say that I'm trauma informed or that I'm trauma trained, it includes that larger bubble of things.
Yeah.
I also was trained and fully believe in the mind-body connection with trauma too. I believe that we may intellectually think we've dealt with a lot of our issues, when in reality we're still holding them somewhere in our body, and so they'll come up And so right now, what I'm seeing a lot with the time that we're in is that people are having things come up that they thought they'd put away a long time ago. And so, trigger is a word that we throw around a lot in modern society. And, we talk about all of these things, but I don't know that people fully understand them until they have embraced that they're in it and that they need to work it out.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been kind of this backlash against the word triggered
Yeah,
and a downplaying of it. People poo-poo it and they use it as slang.
right.
And in reality, it's a very important word and it's a
Yes,
very important and real thing that people experience often.
right.
Um, uh, so what I mean, I know that there's 1,000 different ways that you can be triggered and you
Sure.
might not even be aware of it. But there are physical and emotional symptoms or reactions. So can
Right.
you explain what that means and what some of those are?
So again, I always default to sort of the obvious stuff, and when people think of trigger, they think of, at least in the mental health field, the first person that is thought of is a combat soldier when you think of triggering. And we've seen it all on TV and movies now. They hear a helicopter overhead and they're triggered into some sort of violent act, or they go and hide somewhere because they think that they're under attack. Those, while great for TV, are are real, can be real. Like those things happen on a less sort of dramatic scale. Though you may have had sexual violence in your past, and the song that was playing at the party outside the door that you don't even know necessarily remember can trigger you down the road. You start shaking, you start sweating, you don't know why. Suddenly you're nervous and you're in the middle of a mall. You don't understand why that has. So the it's a sensory input that triggers some sort of physical and or emotional reaction.
Yeah,
And when we're in a state of trauma, so for instance, that sexual violence piece, we oftentimes, our brain locks into one thing or another. We kind of shut off all our senses to protect ourselves, except for maybe one thing. So a color, a smell, very, very often triggers our olfactory. So you get a smell that was in the room that night, and you don't realize it until years later. I have a personal story of my own mother's perfume, years after she died, walking through a mall where you get inundated with all of them and just bursting into tears and not understanding what was going
oh
on, and
my
then
God, I
realizing
had the same thing. My
yes.
mom used to use Nivea hand cream,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and my friend had it in her purse. I said, "Oh, my mom used to use that. Can I smell it?" I opened it, smelled it, and immediately started bawling on the
Yes.
subway.
Yeah.
It was
And you're like, "What is happening?" Yeah.
what? It's really intense,
Right.
and
Yes.
it's uncontrollable,
Mhm. Yeah.
and people might look at you like you're nuts, but it's very real.
Yes. And it's uncontrollable in its effect, but it is manageable once you are aware of what they are and how
Right.
you can, how you can
Okay.
ride them out, basically. I find what happens a lot of times with people is they're shocked by it, and so that adds to the fear level of it. Whereas people who understand what's happening can ride it out. It's like panic
Yeah.
attacks. People who are frequent panic attack folks, they know what's up and they ride them out, and they actually aren't as big a deal as somebody who's having one for the first time who thinks they're dying.
Right.
There's a difference in that. Awareness is huge in
Right.
almost every situation, I think, being
And
aware of what's going on.
one of my questions has been, so many of us have been thrown into new circumstances, like we're sheltering in place,
Yes.
we're unable to leave our homes.
Mhm.
A lot of our so-called control of our life has
Right,
been
right,
obviously taken away from us.
right,
And some of the things that we did either consciously or unconsciously to manage our emotional state are no longer options.
right.
So, for instance, like I used to walk through the park every day, and that was
Yeah,
one of my stress relievers. I haven't been out of my house in 3 weeks.
right, right.
So, what are you noticing in your clients right now? And like what are people experiencing where they're like, I'm stuck in my house and I can't avoid my feelings or my triggers right now?
Right. Well, I think it's funny because I can't avoid my feelings is a common thing that's happening that I was hoping they weren't doing anyway. So, there's a difference between managing your triggers and avoiding your feelings. And lots of people default to trying to avoid their feelings when they're in a situation like this because they know, oh, I don't have the things I used to have to manage. So I'm just going to try to shove all this off. And we all know that doesn't work in the long term or really in the short term either. You end up being more triggered by things. You end up being more reactive to things. So that's what I'm seeing a lot of is people, defaulting to that old way of doing it, which is just don't try not to feel it or beat themselves up over feeling it. I thought I had this handled. I thought I had this managed. And I say, you did. This is an unprecedented time that we're living through right now that could be bringing up things that you're used to, or it could be bringing up things you didn't even know you still had to deal with. We've as New Yorkers, I would imagine there are some folks that have some 9/11 stuff coming up and some Sandy stuff coming up. You guys are in a state that is similar in the eeriness of the city and the quiet of the city and things like that. And you don't have the connections that you had after both of those events that helped you through.
Having lived through both 9/11 and Sandy, I can
Yeah.
say that's absolutely true. And even after 9/11, we were able to walk out in
Yes.
the streets. People
Yeah.
were gathering, and that was an incredible, soothing, connecting like I
Yeah.
always say, like, New Yorkers are amazing in crisis. We
Yeah.
take such good care of each other when the
Yeah.
chips are down. And like right now is a very different situation.
Right. Right.
So I am curious, all this stuff we've been talking about, traumas getting re-triggered, etc. That's really applies mostly to the adults who are listening
Yes.
and their children, the parents who are listening, who they may be noticing, maybe their own kid is withdrawing or
Mhm.
acting out, and it's really complicated because we are having our own internal struggles
Yes.
and
Yeah.
our kids are having their own experience of what's happening right now. How can we take care of ourselves and our kids? How do we talk to them about how they're feeling?
Yeah, and I think I it sounds strange, but I get a little bit excited at this opportunity because I think you we collectively have an opportunity right now to teach our kids resilience like never before. So, and those of us with childhood trauma have an opportunity to really change those patterns in this moment. So how you deal with it, that's what they're learning. And so dealing with it, not avoiding it, not pretending it's not happening. Not you're not they're not your therapist, they're not your counselor, so you're not sharing everything with them, but you can share some of the fact that, look, you're having a difficult time with this too. And you don't have to give them the whole backstory of why, but just because this is a difficult time. So sharing with them, here's what I'm doing to help myself. I'm walking the dog every day, or I'm going out to the back patio or the balcony and just breathing in some fresh air every day, or I make sure I'm going to bed at, a certain time, or this is why we're still making sure you go to bed at a certain time. Giving the kids the insight into why you're doing what you're doing is helping them see that there are reasons for this stuff. One of the things I've been telling parents is keep a schedule as much as possible, and not a minute by minute schedule, but waking up and going to bed, and maybe meals if you can have mealtime schedule. Lower the expectations a little bit, but also try to keep some sense of routine, not necessarily normalcy, because none of this is normal, but a routine in place so that they know you're still in charge, but you also are showing them the reality of the fact that we're all trying to get through this thing in our own way. So if you yell at them, which you're going to do, because they're going to act out. Kids don't have the verbal language to tell you how they're feeling, no matter how old they are. Your 17-year-old still isn't going to have the verbal language to tell you how they're feeling. So they're going to be sullen, or they're going to be rude, or they're going to feel defiant to you in this moment. And really all that is them saying, I'm really anxious about this and I don't know what to do with that feeling either. So that's the key to taking care of yourself, is so that you can show up in those moments for them and say, and rather than reacting in an angry or frustrated way, and say to them, I see what's happening. I think what's going on is that you're scared and nervous. So let's talk about this. You
Yeah.
don't need to do your math right now if it's stressing you out this much. Let's talk about what's going on right now. Here are some
Yeah.
things I do.
Yeah.
That's a way to show up for them
Yeah.
and yourself at the same time.
Right. And, what other challenge themes are you noticing with parents right now? What areas of struggle are they having?
I think it's in that reaction. They're yelling at their kids. They're frustrated that they're not getting their own work done and their kids aren't getting their own work done. They wonder, like, well, do they act like this in school? There's all of this kind of,
Are you this awful with your teacher?
right, are you this mean to your teacher? Yeah, and it's a combination of things. I think parents think, I've been flexible. I've moved my work here, that they've moved their school here. Like, why can't we just establish this thing? When really it's if you're honest with yourself, you're feeling some kind of way about this change, and they are too. So especially for kids who don't love school, you've now taken the thing they don't like and put it in their safe place.
Mm.
So it's a really difficult transition for them, and parents are beating themselves up for their reaction to that.
Oh.
And I think just give yourself a little grace. You're going to yell at them sometimes. It's just inevitable right now. Everybody's tensions are at a place that they can't 100% control their reactions to things. That said, there's so much power in the repair. That's where the teaching happens. You come into them and say later, I shouldn't have reacted that way. I'm really sorry. What's really going on? Tell me, I know this, is this really about math, or is this about, whatever? And he or she may not know. You may have to say to them, I think what's happening is you're really confused and you miss your friends, and all of those kind of things. And then you can use that as a way to create whatever they need to help themselves. Maybe they need a Zoom call with their friends, or they need to stop schoolwork at noon instead of 2.
Yeah.
There's some beauty in the fact that we have the freedom to schedule however we want to schedule at this point. I mean, I think most schools have online components, but I'm not sure any of them are going a full day, except my one kid. I have one kid who's in classroom 8 to 4 every day.
Wow.
But the other two have kind of, a list of assignments, and they get to decide a little bit how they do it and when they check in and that kind of thing. So,
yeah,
I think give yourself some grace, but also understand that there's a lot of power in that repair.
I like that, the power in the repair.
Yeah.
That leads me back to a word that you threw out earlier that is one of my absolute favorite topics, and that's resilience.
Yes. Yeah.
So talk a little bit more about what resilience is and how we can get better at it in
Right.
times of crisis like this.
Well, I think resilience, by definition, is just the ability to kind of come back from things or last through tough times. And so this is a perfect opportunity for everybody to be practicing that, because this is a tough time, no matter where you fall on the spectrum of, are you a frontline worker, or are you somebody who, just like me, is lucky enough to just have kept her job and be doing it at home? Even though that is way down on the spectrum of difficulty from the frontline worker, it's still a huge change and something that we're all managing through. So teaching your kids those skills is really just teaching them coping skills for when things get hard. And that resilience comes from getting through hard things, but you have to do it in a way that you don't feel like you're defeated by it. And sometimes that includes having a day where you're defeated by it. There are times where knowing your feelings and allowing them to happen is a huge coping skill for this time. I don't think I've ever preached mindfulness more than I have in the last 4 weeks, which seems strange considering we're in crisis, and usually in crisis you just, you address the thing that's right in front of you first. And I'm not saying that's not the way to do it, but I think what's right in front of you first is your own stuff. So how do you address that in a way that's helpful to you and everybody around you?
Yeah. So what are some coping tools that you've taught your own kids? What are some things that you have had to talk with them about recently?
So it all starts with tuning in and knowing what's going on with you. And again, they don't have the verbiage for it, but they can say, they know frustrated, they know, and even when they're little, they know, I feel itchy. I feel like I want to punch something. I feel like, they have that sort of language. And so I preach it to my own, and I tell it to anybody that I come in contact with, tuning in, taking a minute, taking a deep breath. Where do you feel it in you? What do you feel like? What are you feeling? Are you really mad at your teacher, or are you really mad at the fact that you're sitting on your couch trying to do math work, which isn't what you want to be doing, And then, okay, well, what do you need to help that? So you can't help until you know what's the problem is. And if you don't look inside, you don't know what the problem is. So, some of the coping things that come from looking inside are taking a break, go ride your bike for 15 minutes, get outside, or jump. We have a little reformer trampoline, go jump. Moving their bodies is very often a solution for kids. And social. They don't even realize sometimes. I have these 3 kids that think they're super introverts, and all of them are missing that in between class stuff of 2 minutes of FaceTime with the friend next to you, or, talking before the teacher starts, that kind of stuff. They're really craving that right now. So we organize some Zoom calls for the kids and have them doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm sensing a lot of overwhelm
Yeah, for
from
sure.
people in my own groups and a couple clients. They're now working from home and being like a semi homeschool parent.
Right.
And we're not able to, we love our kids and we're not
Mhm.
able to get away from them.
Right.
Right?
Right.
They're in my
Yeah.
house all the time. So, what do we, how do we begin to like really express our needs? Because what I'm also seeing is not just the overwhelm, but like, it's hard for us to communicate how we're feeling and
Right.
set
Right.
up ways for us to, have a safe space. And here's another word that gets thrown around a lot that doesn't get the credit it's due. We actually
Yes.
do need a safe space to talk about how we're feeling. So, how do we
Yes.
do that now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just having this conversation with somebody yesterday about why people are coming to therapists all of a sudden. And I think I get the sense that as the therapist, I'm the person that they can complain to without judgment. And including judging their own selves for it. They feel free to say to me everything that they're feeling without worrying about any backlash. And I think right now, especially moms, we have this wonderful way of saying, here are all the good things that are going on. We have a way of being grateful and knowing what we bring, knowing our privilege. Let's just call it what it is, knowing our privilege. And that's great. And you need to be able to feel bad and allow yourself to feel bad. And again, you're teaching your kids how to take care of themselves. So do you want to raise them in a way where they don't express their needs and they don't get what they need to feel better? Or do you want to teach them how to do that in a way that is kind to everyone around them? Because if you don't get what you need, you're not going to be kind to everybody around you. So asking for that time, my kids know that I go out and walk every day with or without the dog. I just had an argument the other day because I asked them to walk the dogs and they were like, but you walk the dogs. And I was like, I don't want to today. I don't want to be in charge of anyone. I just want to go for a walk. And so,
Yeah.
they're older, so I can have that kind of frank conversation. But even if they were little, I would have said, what I need right now is to be outside by myself, not talking to anybody. Not listening, not managing
Right.
anybody's emotions, including the dog.
Right.
So, being honest about it. And I think you're able to do that if you know what you need. Because
How would you word that for a younger kid?
so I would just use an example of whatever they had done. You know how I had you talk to your friend today, or how you went on the trampoline today. Well, I'm feeling the same way and I need to get that out. It's instead of saying processing your emotions, I need to
Mm-hmm.
get it out of myself. I need to get it out of my body so that I can
Mm.
come back and make dinner, that kind of thing. And this is what I need for that right now. I need 10 minutes in this room where no one asks me anything. Whatever it is, that may be the solution. You just need it to be quiet, especially moms or empath moms. I mean, you now
Mm.
have however many people in your house that you're managing all of their emotions probably. It's
Yeah.
a heavy time. And
Yeah.
so getting your recharge. I have one friend who's waking up really early because she's like, I'm not sleeping well anyway. So I'm just getting up and doing everything I need to get done between like 5 and 7 a.m. And then
Mm-hmm.
she's like, then I'm just there for my kids and I have no guilt over not doing work and not doing.
Mm.
So I think people are figuring it out. We just have to give ourselves permission to do that.
Right. Right.
You know, she had to give herself permission to not feel guilty through the rest of the day if she wasn't working because she'd gotten up really early to work.
Right. I want to go back to a conversation we had before I hit record, and that was like some parents are no longer together, no longer living in the
Yeah.
same home, including myself. I share my son with his dad, and there's some extra anxiety and lack of clarity around like how do we share the kid right now,
Right.
how do we travel back and forth, and that's just one example of extra layers of complexity that a
Yes.
lot of parents are feeling, whether they're living in the same house or not. And you said something really valuable, which was there's no right answer right now.
Right. Right.
Because there is a lot of conflicting information
Hmm.
about what is safe and what people should be doing. So, what would you say to someone who's just like, I don't know what to do based on the conflicting information out there?
Right. Right. And I think the very first thing I recommend is that you go and find information from, a doctor in a hospital or somebody, somebody that's front lines. There was a video going around from a doctor at Weill Cornell or Weill Cornell, Cornell. I don't know how you say the first name, but um, with some transmission information, with some, contagion information that I found really helpful because for that very reason. There's a lot of information out there that it makes it sound like you can't even open your front door without being infected. So I think, you know, I always say limit your media, but also find the information that's going to clarify really what you're looking for, rather than the stuff that's just going to fill in the anxiety holes that you're trying to, fill in the story. I have a number of clients in a similar situation who, in the best case scenario, they get along with the other parent. And then in the worst case, there's not only they have conflicting stuff, but they may have conflicting views about what's going on right now. And so that's a tricky situation as well, because you're trying to, live by one set of rules and that other parent isn't doing the same. And so, knock on wood, I have to say all of my clients have figured out something, which I'll be honest, I was kind of surprised by because of some of the relationship stuff that's been going on. But I think this time has really made everybody kind of acquiesce to the kid finally, which has
Ah,
always,
interesting.
yeah, which is always what should be happening, but it isn't always the best thing.
So people are finding their way, and it doesn't always match what everybody else is
Nope.
doing.
Nope, exactly. But it's best for the three of them or the five of them or however many kids there are. It's working for the parents, it's working for the kids. In a lot of cases, the parents are still working outside the home. So there's a
Mm,
lot of nervousness around that. And how are you handling that? And, it's, again, there is no right answer because no two situations are exactly the same.
right, right.
So I think always defaulting to what's best for the kid and what's safest for the kid is the
Hmm.
important piece of that, which
Yeah.
stinks for one or both of the parents at any given
Right.
time.
Yeah. Can we just all acknowledge that this just
It
stinks?
just stinks. Yep.
All the way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
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 Um, so I know that you have your own resources. I know that you've been recording meditations for people and you have an ebook. I would love to know what other resources you have for people who want to go deeper with you.
I think the best thing right now is to get on my email list, because that's where I'm really communicating with people in the sense that I'm constantly on the lookout for resources. So I'm sending out email blasts with, I found this today. I found this today. I have a little bit of that in my Facebook group as well, but it's on a broader scale in the email correspondence. So if my website is just my name, CristieRitzking.com. If you go there and scroll to the bottom, you can get on that list. And then I'm sending out at least weekly, if not bi-weekly stuff with updates and, some of my own stuff and some of stuff I find all around. That doctor's video was part of my last email. So I'm
Yeah.
just trying to provide people with as much as I can so that they don't have to do that work. They're
Yeah.
busy doing a lot of other work. Let me go look for the stuff you need to help you.
Yeah, and that's really, I just want to shout out to Christie's work. It's really valuable to have such an expert who is trained in all of these different layers, whether it's trauma or relationship counseling, parenting. Like a lot of us need a combination of all those things right now.
Yeah.
And we're managing different layers of upset or necessity. So I just really want to encourage you to sign up for Christie's newsletter at CristieRitzKing.com. She's an amazing resource. She's a great coach and a
Thank
great
you.
therapist. Yeah. Um, Anything else that you think is important to share right now?
I'm looking, I took some notes, so I'm looking to see if there's anything I didn't. I think just knowing, some of the stuff I said about the kids, like understanding that they're acting out and they're, what you might think is defiance right now it isn't personal. Don't take anything that they do. Quite frankly, when I had little babies, my husband and I just established this rule that anything that happened after midnight didn't count. Like we couldn't be mad at each other for something that was said at 3:00 in the morning. And I think because we had one really horrible, nasty blow up and realized like the next day we didn't even fully remember exactly what it was about. And so we were like, you know what? I think that we're in a place right now where we can't be judged after midnight.
Right.
And I feel like some of that right now for all of us is, is true. Like you can't judge your kids based on their behavior in this moment. And you can't judge yourself based on your behavior in this moment. Like know it, understand it, try to do it as best you can, but know that these are not, you're not establishing house rules for the rest of your life at this point.
Right.
You're living in a crisis. You need to behave as such in the sense that whatever is established for right now is not necessarily the thing that's going to exist in a few months. And that's okay. What you're teaching your kids is resilience and coping. You're not teaching them, I have so many friends right now that are teaching their kids like how to do the laundry, how to bake, dinner. I'll make dinner on. So, now's a great time for that kind of stuff, but understanding that the way you're feeling is also the way they're feeling.
Yeah.
And when kids act in a way that makes you feel a certain thing, usually it's them trying to communicate to you that's how they're feeling. So if you're frustrated and angry and up to your eyeballs with them, that's them trying to tell you that's how they feel.
Yeah, so deep compassion for
Yes,
yourself
for everybody
and
involved.
everybody else you're living with.
Yeah.
Cristie
Yeah.
Ritz-King,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here with us today. I really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time.
Thank you. And good luck to everybody out there doing your best. As I keep
Yeah.
saying, your best is the best right now.
Love it. Thank
Yeah.
you.